Testing 1, 2, 3. Alrighty. Time for your favorite YouTuber. Last time I showed you guys some weird thing I called AGL or Angel. Now I've got a bunch of examples for it. And in here I've accomplished a moderately complex example. This one has the agent framework as a dependency. It's the only dependency really. And then it has a CLI tool for interacting with Gmail, but this could be anything. Like if you think of everything is a list, then substitute email for Slack, Jira tickets, a list of anything. Then we've got Memo, which is my tool for long-term memory. It's a vector database. This is microagents. This is my way of doing agents. This is how I think agents should be done. And then voice. This is you'll hear it, but it can talk. So I'm using LM Studio with Google Gemma4 model. That's a 9 billion parameter model. That's a small one. And that's on my RTX 5070 Ti. We'll pull up the NV top. But we kind of have to subtract what OBS is doing. So over here we've got LM Studio. I've already turned on the server and I've already loaded the model. It's listening, waiting for its next instruction. You can see the quantization and format. I also have the context, 131,000 tokens, GPUs. Seems fine right now. Who's that UK guy? Has a talk show. Yeah, I think that's right. So I run and it's pulling my email, and before you know it,
calendar invite Rocky Mountain Power Apra 28 2026. Recommend mark as read plus delete.
This is one of the Piper models, and I like this one because it's CPU based, and so it doesn't. I can save the GPU VRAM for work, and then the voice still sounds pretty good quality. Look how fast that was. You can't get inference that fast in the cloud. I haven't yet with any of the major providers. There's at least like a guaranteed 2-second, usually 3-second delay just to route it over the network and get in line for inference with the big boys. But here you can see it just using my GPU for a fraction of a second, and then my GPU is free again. So this is not only fast, but it's efficient. So what it's done here is it's looked through a journal of all the other times that I saw one of these and answered, and it didn't find an entry for this one. I'm still training it. I've got about 100 entries in there right now in the journal. So, but it's made a fairly good guess. So this is going through LM Studio, I'll show you, but let's ask it a question. We're at a prompt here. I do also have a voice keyboard.
Amazon order shipped safety glasses. Recommend mark as read move to expenses receipts.
Does it say what day that was shipped or when they'll be arriving?
The email indicates that the package is arriving Tuesday.
Proceed.
New LinkedIn invitations and activity. Recommend mark as read delete.
So yeah, this one. So now it's like after about a batch of 10, it will commit and push, so to speak. So the way the Google email tool works, which is a separate tool that you can use on the command line, you don't have to use it with an agent. It has like this offline copy. It works a lot like Git, where it pulls the email down in YAML format. It queues up any changes locally on the local offline cache copy, and then you can plan and apply, kind of like Terraform, but it's more like a Git push. And then it applies it to the remote. And then you can delete your local cache. Yeah, so it does all those steps at the end, right before it shuts down. So it'll do like a batch of 10 is how I configured it right now. Of the emails in the last 14 days, that's what I configured. This is an example of what the journal looks like. This is a tool I call Memo, and the way it works is it stores databases. You have a base name like journal, and then it stores a pair of 2 files. One is binary, that's the memo file, Those where the embeddings are, and then YAML. This is the human readable version. And you can actually edit this copy and then do what's called reindex, and it'll just rebuild the memo from this file. So it's an easy way to see in and transparently understand what's in the database, edit it, and then update the database if you wanted it that way. But this is a basic shape that the journal entries take, and they're just remembering. Summary and keywords is mainly so I can find it again contextually. I can do a subjective search and get a ranked relevancy score, and I'll take the top 10 and then I'll feed those all to the agent, and the agent will decide which ones apply, if any. And then when I tell it, like, if I don't just say proceed, then that means I'm giving it some specific instructions that was a deviation from its recommended action, and therefore that will generate a new journal entry. So every time, every loop, every new email, it's consulting the journal, updating the journal, unless it was right. If it was right, then like at its guess, at its recommendation, then there's no change made, it just proceeds. And the goal is to get it to the point where 99% of the time it can find in its journal the appropriate action. So I've found this to be a pretty fast curve, more than linear, maybe not quite exponential, but there's definitely, you could feel it learning, and you can get to the point where it feels like you're just going proceed, proceed, proceed already after about 100 to 200 emails, at least in my inbox. And it probably would, your mileage would vary based on the variance, how many unique kinds of emails you're getting, and how descriptive you are when you tell it things that it wants to save and remember in the journal. And then in the config file, what I've got is a list of the labels that are available to choose from when deciding how to move a folder, and then the description of when to use those. So between those two things, like deciding where to move, it can make good decisions based on the journal entries that were matched, and the list of valid folders with their rationale, their purposes, descriptions attached. So let's try another one.
Found Amazon package last name fine recommend mark as read plus move to Arco.
Someone was looking for a package in the neighborhood and found it. Instead of hard coding 14 days ago as the value for since, let's make that a command line parameter passed into the agent, the personal email agent. Let's call it the first optional parameter, and if you don't specify it, then it defaults to 14 days ago via the highlighted line.
Feedback request from Little Caesars about your visit on 4/10/2026 recommend delete.
It's doing good so far.
Action required. Ingress engine X controller support expired. Assess your environment recommend mark as read move to newsletters. DR Horton Marketing Red Tag Savings Home
Basically,
Promotions recommend delete. Art summer camps and workshops open. Hennis/market info included recommend mark as read move to newsletters. LinkedIn invitation and search activity recommend mark as read delete.
Proceed.
Jostens class ring and senior sale up to $100 off plus free shipping offers. Recommend. Mark as read plus archive.
Delete this one. I'm no longer interested in this company since my son has graduated.
See their virtual event schedules are live. Recommend. Mark as read. Move to newsletters.
Proceed.
Two packages delivered today from Amazon. Recommend. Mark as read plus move to archive.
Oh yeah, my gloves. Proceed. You want to get those gloves on the porch? So once I get this to the point where it's mostly just proceed, then I don't have to say that anymore. I could just leave it on autopilot. Alright, so how does this work? When you look into the section here called microagents, I have this opinionated guide which describes what these are and how I code them and how I prefer they to be coded. But it comes down, it says 10, but I deleted one, so there's actually 9. And in here you can get an idea of what they do. I'll show you one of them. This is one whose job it is to recommend an action. So it basically has 3 main parts: the system prompt and what we call the output tool, but this describes how we want our output structured. Strongly typed and structured as JSON. And then this is the user prompt, but it's written in a way that clearly delineates the inputs. And then the system prompt is basically telling it, you know, your job is to recommend which operations you should, you know, we should take on the email based on past journal entries, and yeah, and then it just includes a line about how it should be reasoning about the relevancy of the journal entries, and then it describes detail about like when it makes a tool call and how it provides its output, like what are valid choices, what are valid ranges, valid outputs, and constraints that it should observe. And then you just run this thing, and when it gives the result back, it's like an object with these keys: journal ID, operations, rationale, and sometimes I forward that straight out, and other times I'll turn it into a string template. It depends on what I want to do with it once it pops out. This is essentially one function. And so, as someone in the chat described it, it's like function calling with clankers. I think that's a good definition of what I call a microagent. And here's another one, number 2. Really couldn't be simpler. This one's job is to determine, is the user asking a question? So you saw an example where I asked James if there was, you know, some information about the email, which might be in the original raw form of the email, but not in the summary that I could see. And then he's able to pull that data out and summarize it for me further so I can get more detail. And so that exchange depends on an agent that its only job is to look at just the input I gave when I spoke and then determine if that's a question. And if it's not a question, it's just a Boolean yes or no. Is the user asking a question? So I return a Boolean from this function, and that function is used to guide how the script branches. Like if it's a question, then it's going to run another agent which is designed to answer the question. Again, very simple. These are all, when I call them microagents, I mean their job is to answer like one subjective question. So this one takes the user's question and the email, and then it returns the answer as a string, right? This is beautiful to me because it's really hard to blow up the context window. Like you'll never run out of context as long as the email fits. And some of the tricks I do to make the email fit is like I pre-filter it, so it's mostly just the words, not the HTML tags, CSS, JavaScript, no images, and I keep alt tags and accessibility text, but that's it. So that way it can fit pretty well. I cut out all, what did they say? I compact all the white space, so instead of like a million new lines, there's only one. And this way I can fit it. And that's the version I'm passing around to all the different microagents, is that pre-filtered email, as I think of it. That way it always fits in the context window. It'd take a pretty large email to go beyond that context window. And then we move to the summarization step. So the summarization step, you summarize emails for fast human triage, be concise and factual. I love this one, sacrifice grammar for concision. This is kind of the executive business speak. And it delivers a headline that's a one-liner and a description, which is the body that I read. So this is the one that gets spoken aloud, and this is the one that you can read on the screen. And for that, I pass in a user's formatting instructions. So if I say something like, the next time we read one of these emails from LinkedIn, I only want you to focus on stuff that people said to me directly. You know, I could say something like that and it would be remembered in it's a different kind of memo database. It's one called presentation, but it's next to the journal, and it gets updated at the same time as the journal. But this one just keeps the user's formatting instructions for the next time the email is rendered, and then that comes in here along with the email content, and that will influence how the description is generated. It outputs the headline and the description, and then this is a pre-formatted version of it, so depending on what one I want, I have them all there in this case. This one just determines, does a journal entry apply to this email? This one says, so I didn't show you this, but I can stop and say a keyword like memo or journal along with my human readable sentence. So as long as that keyword's in there, it's an activation keyword. And it will allow me to amend the memory in the journal or in the presentation memo database. So I can delete, I can say like delete memo 23. I can say reindex the memo database after I manually edited the YAML myself. I can say, add a new memo, remember this. Or I can say update memo 23, add this fact, or change that memory, it was wrong. So this is an agent that's responsible for create, read, update, delete on the memo databases. And then this one is the main one that does the work. So this one takes my human instructions and it can mark as read, unread, delete mail, and move mail. It's really all it can do. And then this one is the one that writes to the journal. And notice that I give it structured input, I get structured output back out. There's like 4 different fields, and then I serialize that to YAML in the journal. And then finally, this is the one that writes to the presentation memo database. Similar approach as the journal, but has different kinds of data focused on any user instructions that describe formatting of the email. So altogether, these microagents are what cooperate to make a single agent. And this one's called personal email. Some people might refer to these as like subagents, but I wouldn't, because subagents usually have a lot more autonomy and freedom and bigger system prompts, and they received a series of user prompts, not just one, and they have like a large array of tools, not just a couple. So subagents are much more capable than microagents. Microagents' job is literally make one decision and die. So it doesn't go beyond like one user prompt. Its job in life is to make like one tool call and then give up. Sometimes it might make 2 or 3 tool calls and then finish. And its job is to return structured output reliably. And it's that reliability part that really makes this golden. The small size, which fits on local LLMs, and the ability to not get lost because it's got so few choices in life that it has to make. You have one job, microagent. So this is just one example. It's not even the first example. It's not the last example. I'm going to keep adding more agents. I don't know if I'll publish all of them. Some of them I use for personal, some I use for work. But what I said earlier about lists, if anything that's a list could be given to an agent this way, and then the agent could be unsupervised. It could be left alone, long running, it never runs out of context, and it just initially you're just spending a little bit of time training it to make those vector database journal entries. Eventually, though, once you build confidence in it, once it's just proceed, then you can just let it rip. You can leave it alone. As always, if you learned something, like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time.